evening, welcome, and thank you for attending the latest in a series of public events by the Michael V. Hayden Center for Intelligence, Policy, and International Security. I am Mark Rozelle. I serve as Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, and we host the Hayden Center. Some of you know that General Hayden has been on our faculty for the past 11 years. It will not surprise you to know that when his courses have been announced online, they fill up in a matter of minutes. The respect and affection for General Hayden at the Schar School and George Mason University are enormous. And if you follow his social media, you will see those feelings are shared around the country and even internationally. During very challenging times, many continue to look to General Hayden for his leadership and courage. General Hayden has shown remarkable courage since the stroke he suffered in November of 2018. He has recently made some appearances on television as an analyst. There's been a couple remarkable segments on CNN where he's been a regular analyst in the past. And I'm especially excited to introduce General Hayden now for him to give a brief welcome to all for this program. General Hayden.
Thank you again. Well, thank you. It's going to be a wonderful evening. Okay, we have two good people that I know very well, Mike Morell and also Admiral McRaven. It's going to be really interesting. So Michael and Admiral McRaven and Michael, they're going to be wonderful. So thank you again. Larry, let's get on with it.
All right, great. Thank you, General Hayden, and wonderful to see you. I know a lot of folks out there really glad to see you back in the saddle, doing this great work for us. Just wanted to quickly remind the audience about what we're up to here. The Hayden Center's mission is to better inform folks about intelligence and how it works with the policymakers and how the decision makers use intelligence or sometimes don't use intelligence to do their work. A couple of administrative things. Number one, I'd love for you all to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We got a website, haydencenter.gmu.edu. Please check us out at all of those locations. If you find anything interesting tonight, go ahead and tweet about our event. Would love to get some tweets going on what's said tonight. A couple administrative things. We are recording the event. We are also live streaming it on YouTube. So there are going to be audience members at a number of locations and not just while we're doing the event live. Questions and answer. We're going to have time for Q&A later in the hour. We will be using the Q&A panel in Zoom. So acquaint yourself with Zoom if you haven't already. Find that Q&A panel. That's where you should type your question. If you've got an affiliation you'd like us to know about, please put it in the text box so that we can mention it for you. We would love you to be brief. We'd love you to put it in the form of a question. And we're going to do our best to get to as many questions as possible. We got some special guests in the audience tonight that I did want to mention. The former Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, is watching. We have the Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Intel and Analysis, Leslie Ireland, who was a guest at our last event, as well as David Priest, another former two-time panelist for us here at the Hayden Center and former CIA analyst and PDB briefer and author. Former director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Letitia Long, is watching. She is also chairman of the board for the Intelligence and National Security Alliance, INSA, good friends of the Hayden Center. If you are not aware, they're going to be co-hosting an event next week called the Intelligence and National Security Summit. It's the premier event every year that brings together the practitioners of intelligence, brings together academics, brings together industry to talk about intelligence every year. Normally in person, this year virtual. If you go search for it online at the INSA website or search Intelligence and National Security Summit, I'm sure you can still register. We've got a lot of students, faculty, and staff from Schar School, from George Mason University, other colleges. Glad to have you here. I know you're having a rough time this year getting back to school, so we appreciate you taking time to be with us. Lastly, I'd like to note that we have a lot of former colleagues from the Intel community. We've got some members of the Special Operations community out there. watching, and many of them have been involved or had been involved in the hunt for bin Laden. And so I just would like to say thank you to those people who did the work behind the scenes, did all the hard work that made the rest of us all look good, bringing bin Laden to justice. As I mentioned in the information about this event, it was 10 years ago this month that Michael Morell joined the director of CIA, Leon Panetta, in going to brief President Obama on this place called Abbottabad and this funny looking compound and the intelligence assessment as to who lived there. It was not the easiest decision to make, and I'm sure Michael will go into that as we proceed in the event. Tonight we'll look at the intelligence, we'll look at the operational planning, we'll look at the execution, we'll look at the ramifications and the lessons learned from this great operation and how maybe that was applied forward into some of the more current events we have going on today. Lastly, you can't do an event like this without acknowledging that tomorrow is the 19th anniversary of 9/11. And so I would just like to dedicate our event to the memory of all those people that we lost on 9/11, the families that were affected by those horrible losses, and also the losses of the men and women of our intelligence community and our U.S. Armed Forces who we lost in the attempts to bring bin Laden to justice and in the attempts to stop this scourge of terrorism. With that, I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce our guests. We have Olivia Gazis. She's going to be moderating. Olivia is a CBS News intelligence and national security reporter. She also produces Intelligence Matters, which is a podcast that Michael Morell hosts for CBS News. And we're going to be recording this event for use on that podcast as well. Michael Morell, former acting director of CIA, a senior fellow here at the Hayden Center, distinguished visiting professor here at the Schar School. Thank you, Michael, for once again joining us. And then last but not least, we have Admiral William McRaven, Bill McRaven, former commander, U.S. Special Operations Command, former commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, the man who organized and led the operation to bring bin Laden to justice. Most recently, he completed another challenging mission. He led the University of Texas system as the chancellor, and also the author of 3 really fascinating books. Most recently, Sea Stories, My Life in Special Operations, a great book called Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life, which fed off of a great commencement address he gave in the past. And then a book that's probably a little thumb-eared when you go to the library to pick it up, but Special Ops, Case Studies in Special Operation Warfare Theory and Practice, the seminal discussion of special operations in the U.S. military. So enough of me talking. Let me go ahead and throw it over to Olivia. Everybody enjoy the evening, and thank you all for being here. I'll talk to you again at the end.
Thank you so much, Larry and Dean Rozelle and General Hayden and the entire Hayden Center for hosting another very timely discussion tonight. Thank you, of course, also to our 2 esteemed guests for making the time to tell this important story. Tonight's discussion is about looking back at the extraordinary work and the teamwork that went into finding and bringing to justice the world's most notorious terrorist, Osama bin Laden. It's also, of course, an opportunity to reflect on where we are today, more than 10 years later. As a quick roadmap, we'll break it down just that way, before, during, and after the raid on Abbottabad, using some key dates and events to sort of guide us. And then we'll shift a discussion into current events. And then per tradition, we'll leave ample time for questions from the audience. Larry has kindly highlighted some of the luminaries who are joining us tonight, so we'll make sure to budget some time for that. Michael, I'd like to start with you. More than 10 years ago, in fact, almost 20 years ago, in 2002, when the agency first got a tip that there was a potential courier working with Osama bin Laden. Take us from that moment in time to where the agency felt confident enough to brief the President of the United States on its findings. How was that tip received? Why did it take until 2010 to get a name and location? And why did it get so promising? If you could just encapsulate that period for us to start.
Sure. First of all, it is great to be with everybody, and certainly great to be with General Hayden. And I just want to join Larry in commemorating all of those people lost on 9/11 and all of those who have served their country in the defense against Al-Qaeda since then. So it's great to be with everybody. So in 2002, a detainee in the detention of a North African country told his debriefers about a guy named Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. And this detainee said that Abu Ahmed was a courier for bin Laden, was somebody who was close to bin Laden, and it went from there. And we took that information, which was given to us by that country, and we asked all the other detainees that were in either our detention or the detention of other countries about this guy named Abu Ahmed. And as we did that, we started to build this picture of Abu Ahmed as a pretty important guy. We were told that he was close to bin Laden prior to 9/11, that he often was a courier for bin Laden prior to 9/11. We were told that he was very close to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, after 9/11. And we were told by one detainee in particular that he could be the kind of person who might be even living with bin Laden. And then probably the most important thing happened. We asked two very senior Al-Qaeda operatives, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed himself and a guy named Abu Faraj al-Libi, about this guy named Abu Ahmed. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed told us that, yes, he was aware of a guy named Abu Ahmed, but he was never a courier, and that he quit working for bin Laden after 9/11. What Abu Faraj told us, and previous detainees had told us that Abu Ahmed was very close to Abu Faraj. So Abu Faraj says, I never heard of a guy named Abu Ahmed, let alone met a guy named Abu Ahmed. And then the coup de grace was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, after his interrogation, goes back to his cell, and he tells his cellmates, nobody say anything about the courier. So all of a sudden, Abu Ahmed skyrockets, right, in our interest. We obviously had the cell bugged, right? So we heard what he was telling on the other prisoners. So at that point, we had his Arab nickname, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. We did not know his true name. It took us 2 to 3 years. So by this time, it's 2003. It took us 2 or 3 years to figure out his true name. It took us another couple of years to find out his phone number. Once we had his phone number, it was pretty easy to locate him on the planet, and we found him in Peshawar, Pakistan. And over a period of time, we followed him from Peshawar to this compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, which is a pretty upscale city in Pakistan, not too far from Pakistan's version of West Point. So it was at that point where we found the compound that our counterterrorism experts came to Director Panetta and me, and that was in August of 2010. And they said, Mr. Director, we have found this guy named Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. Now that name meant nothing to Director Panetta or me. So in that meeting, late on a Friday afternoon, they told us all about Abu Ahmed. They basically told us the story that I just told you. And they told us about this compound where they followed him to. And they really, at that first meeting, gave us the physical characteristics. So a large compound, much larger than the other compounds in the neighborhood. They told us that it was surrounded by walls, 12 to 18-foot walls with barbed wire. They told us that the main house had very few windows. They told us that there was a terrace on the 3rd floor, but the terrace had a privacy wall. So if you're out on the terrace, you actually couldn't see out. And I remember Director Panetta saying, why would you have a privacy wall? Isn't the whole point of a terrace to be able to see out? And what was interesting, Olivia, was that nobody at that meeting, there were only 4 or 5 of us there, but nobody at that meeting said the words bin Laden might be there, but everybody was thinking that. Over the next couple of weeks, we learned some more information. So over the next, I'd say 5 weeks, we learned that Abu Ahmed was there with his brother, Abrar, that they were the owners of the property. They paid cash for it, and neither one of them had any means of work. They weren't working, they weren't earning any money. We learned that there was no telephone at the compound, there was no internet at the compound. We learned that the large number of children at the compound did not go to school, unlike the rest of the kids in the neighborhood. And we learned that the residents of the compound burned their trash as opposed to everybody else in the neighborhood who put their trash out for collection. And we took all of that information and we took it to President Obama on September 21st, 2010, so just 11 days from today. And we briefed him on essentially what I just told you. He gave us two directives. Number one, find out what the hell is going on inside that compound. And number two, don't tell anybody about this. Anybody. And this was the best kept secret that I've ever been involved in government.
Michael, just to complete that intelligence picture, did you deliver all of this to the president with any sort of confidence level? And if you did the agencies involved all have the same confidence level?
Right.
Were there differences?
So great question. At that first meeting, we just briefed him on everything I just told you. We had not yet come to the conclusion that bin Laden was being harbored there. So that took a couple more months. So the president says, find out what's going on inside that compound, right? So we did everything we could to try to learn more about that compound and who was there. And we tried a number of operational concepts to try to gather more information. And we really only gathered a few more tidbits. One was that there was a third family living at the compound. And that third family never left the compound, and that the neighbors were not aware that there was a third family there. We also learned that the composition of that third family was consistent with what we thought bin Laden's family would have been at that moment in time, in terms of number of children, in terms of their age, etc. So that was number one. Number two, and really importantly, we learned that Abu Ahmed was still working for Al-Qaeda. Right? One of our great fears early on was that Abu Ahmed had left Al-Qaeda and was now working for somebody else, you know, organized crime figure, a drug dealer, and you know, any kind of possibility in that direction. And we got some intelligence, collected some intelligence. They made it absolutely clear that he was still in the employment of Al-Qaeda and was still a dedicated jihadist.
But you can or won't tell us how you found that out, right, Michael?
No, but it's really good spy work, Olivia.
Okay.
And so we learned those two pieces, and it was the combination of all of that, still circumstantial, right? But the combination of all of that to lead the analysts in November, December, to tell the president that there was a high probability, in their words, a high probability that Abu Ahmed was harboring bin Laden at the Abbottabad compound. Those are almost the exact words they used, but that wasn't until the late fall.
Right. Admiral McRaven, let's bring you in and fast forward slightly from that point to late January 2011, because at that point, having been presented with the intelligence as it existed, the president asked for some concepts of operation and that the military be brought into the fold. You were told in the past, you've said in the past that there were leads on bin Laden's whereabouts before. Did this particular intelligence stand out? Was it remarkable or unremarkable? Did you think this is just another false lead, or were you actually encouraged by it?
Yeah, well, thanks, Olivia. First, let me also thank General Hayden and Michael Morell, frankly, two of my personal heroes. Having served closely with Michael and General Hayden over many, many years, no two finer public servants, I tell you, in this country that I've seen in the last several generations. So thanks to both of them. And also I appreciate Larry and Michael also, you know, taking the time to pay the respects to those of us in the military and of course in the intelligence community that lost folks after 9/11, on 9/11 and after 9/11. So again, terrific to be here with y'all tonight. To your point though, you know, we'd had a lot of leads on bin Laden. You know, some of them, you know, fairly tangential, but part of the responsibility of my command was to work with the agency and those that had leads to kind of track these down. I remember at one point in time, somebody had reported that bin Laden was up in the Hindu Kush in northern Afghanistan at 14,200 feet. So sure enough, we sent a helicopter to 14,200 feet to track down who we thought might be bin Laden marching through the snow. Needless to say, he wasn't there, but every time one of those leads came up, we would do the best we could to, to kind of follow the end of the lead. Having said that, when I first got notified about this was actually in December of 2010. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, came out to visit us in Afghanistan, which he did quite frequently. And after he talked to all the folks in my headquarters, he said, "Hey, Bill, let's go upstairs and talk." So we went up to my office and he said, "Look, the agency thinks they have a lead on bin Laden, and they may call you to come back and take a look at the intelligence they've got." And I'll be honest with you, I was a little dismissive, only because we had seen a lot of leads before. And again, I didn't have any of the intelligence. It was just Admiral Mullen telling me that the agency, had a lead. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from General Hoss Cartwright, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And I went back, and that's actually when I met up with Michael. And he laid out to me in his office kind of the intelligence that they were looking at. And he didn't give me, in all honesty, a complete look behind the curtain. It was really, hey, here is the compound at Abbottabad. And if your special operations forces had to take down that compound, how would you do it? And I said, it's a compound. It's what we do every night. We were doing about 20 to 25 missions a night in Iraq, and we were doing about 10 to 12 missions a night in Afghanistan. And your average mission in Afghanistan was, you'd take, 5 or 6 heavy lift helicopters, MH-47, the twin-bladed special operations helicopters, put a whole bunch of SEALs and Rangers or Army Special Operations and Rangers. You'd fly about an hour. You'd land at an offset location. You'd foot patrol for about 10 to 15 kilometers, so the enemy couldn't hear you coming. You'd surround the compound. You'd put up blocking positions around. The snipers would get up on the wall, and then you'd lock it down. We actually would come out with a bullhorn and say, come out with your hands up. That rarely happened, but if it did, we'd get the guy, and if not, things tended to get a little sporty. We get the guy, we put him on a helicopter, and we take him back. That was a profile that the force was running, again, about 10 to 12 times a night in Afghanistan. So when Michael showed me the Abbottabad compound, of course, it was this large kind of trapezoid-shaped compound with, kind of the big 3-story building in the middle, a couple of outbuildings. I said, well, it's compound. We know how to do a little bigger than what we're used to. And clearly, as Michael kind of teased me with the intelligence, it was at that point in time, I had to admit it was pretty compelling. I went, after we had the discussion, I actually went back to Afghanistan and then came back very soon thereafter, and then had a discussion, and they really kind of opened up all the books to me and had a chance to look at all the intel. At that point in time, again, I thought the intelligence was very compelling. And then we had our first meeting with the president, and that was, again, I'd have to go back late January, early February, to your point.
Right. And then there came a point where a decision needed to be made whether to leave the operation in the CIA's hands or enlist special operations. You've written about how you made a concerted effort not to make it seem like you guys did do this every night and may have had better ideas on how to approach it than the CIA. Why was that important? And Michael, after Admiral answers the question, let us know how that was received within the agency. Was there a sigh of relief? Was there resentment? Tell us a little bit about how those discussions looked.
So, so when we were brought in, and it was me, and I actually had a Navy captain who was in DC that was kind of helping me coordinate as I bounced back and forth between Washington and Afghanistan. But very early on, I mean, this wasn't about, the Joint Special Operations Command. This wasn't about the military. This was about doing what was right for the country. And if the best chance of getting bin Laden was to go with the agency's paramilitary folks, I was all about it. At the end of the day, we wanted to get bin Laden, and we didn't want this to be about our egos or our reputation or anything to that effect. So I made sure that the message was clear as we were beginning to kind of develop this plan. And there was a great, and I have told this story, I think, before, there was a great kind of former military officer that was leading the effort, and a remarkable professional. And he had a pretty good plan. The problem was we knew it was going to be a little bit more complicated than that. At one point in time, Director Panetta, along with Michael and a number of their senior officers, kind of called me into Panetta's office and said, hey, look, we think based on the complexity of this, you guys probably ought to take the lead. again, to be honest with you, I was even at that point in time a little standoffish because I just wanted to be careful that there wasn't the presumption that we thought we were the pros from Dover and that we were going to come in and do this better than anybody. I wanted to make sure that it was a collaborative effort, but you know, Leon Panetta, who is incredibly gregarious, the great team player, reached out and said, look, we think you're the right folks to do this. And I'll add one more point. When that, and Michael can talk to how the senior leaders looked at it, but when we kind of had to break the news to this young intelligence officer at the agency, instead of kind of moping that he had missed the chance, you know, to be part of this great operation, he did everything that you would expect a great professional to do. He stood up, said, sir, what can I do to help you? And frankly, in the course of the next several months, he and his team did everything they could to help us. He was just remarkable. And the information that he had already gleaned from all the intelligence was exceedingly helpful to our operation. So it was just this great collaborative effort. And it all started with the agency's kind of outreach to us.
And Livy, the only thing I would add is a couple days before we had the conversation with Admiral McRaven in Director Panetta's office, he and I and Jeremy Bash were alone in the director's office, and we were talking about the various concepts of operations that we had at that moment. I think there were 5, but really only 3, because a couple were involving the Pakistanis, and there was no way we were going to go down that road. So we really had like 3 concepts of operations, but they were all complicated. And I remember the conversation, you know, eventually evolved around to, you know, the absolutely best people to do this are JSOC. And we never thought for a second about, you know, we should do this because we found him, or we should do this because, you know, this is going to be a covert action. That never crossed our mind. We wanted to do what would increase, you know, give us the best chance to get in there and get him and get out without anybody being hurt. And there was no doubt in our mind that was Bill and his team, because, as Bill said, they did this multiple times every night in Afghanistan. And we were there with them every night in Afghanistan as they did this. So we knew how good these guys were, and it was a really easy decision to make at the end of the day.
It nonetheless was kind of the CIA's it was the CIA's, because it was a covert action, it was sort of the CIA's operation in terms of an oversight, right? So it went the president, Director Panetta, and then Admiral McRaven was reporting to the CIA director. Why was that, Michael?
Yeah, so the president decided that he wanted this to be a covert action, and he wanted it to be a covert action in case that, you know, Bill's guys went in there and bin Laden wasn't there, and Bill's guys got out without being detected by the Pakistanis. We would just deny everything. We would deny that this ever happened. So the president wanted it to be a covert action, and because of that, it falls under CIA's authorities. So yeah, unusually, in this case, the chain of command went from the president to the CIA director to Bill as the commander. The Secretary of Defense was not in the chain of command. But I will tell you, even though that you know, Director Panetta was playing the role of the Secretary of Defense here, you know, we left all of the operational planning and decisions to Bill. We knew that was not our business. The day after the raid, when it was public that we had gotten him, we gathered all our employees in the auditorium. And at one point in Leon's talk with the employees, he mentioned that he was in charge of this operation. And then he paused and he said, "That's total bullshit. I wasn't in charge of anything." So, you know, that's the way it played out. And I'm sure that Bill can talk, but I'm sure he kept his superiors at the Pentagon informed of what he was doing.
Sure, and Admiral, in fact, so let's skip to late March when the president, it's your second meeting with the president, and he turns to you, having all of this background, and he says, "Can you do the mission, Bill?" You didn't actually tell him 100% yes, we can. What did you tell him?
Yeah, so up to that point in time, because we hadn't brought in the SEALs to do the rehearsal, it was really just a plan that frankly myself and 1 or 2 others had kind of conceived, which was a pretty straightforward plan. You know, we were going to fly a couple of helicopters from Afghanistan to Abbottabad, get the bad guy, put him or the remains back on a helicopter and fly back. We tried to make it as elegant and as simple as we could. But it was 162 miles into Afghanistan, the complexities, the tactical maneuvers on the ground. We hadn't rehearsed any of that because I hadn't brought the SEALs into the discussion and into, behind the curtain, if you will, at that point in time. So the president said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Sir, I don't know." I said, I really need to bring the guys in and we need to rehearse this. He said, "How long do you think it'll take?" I said, "I think it'll take about 3 weeks." And he said, "Okay, you got 3 weeks, report back to me in 3 weeks."
And so what in that period did you actually map out? What kind of contingencies did you plan for?
Yeah, so we had been doing a little, again, I had brought in, the president had agreed to allow me to bring in a couple of kind of subject matter experts, the ground force commander and a helicopter commander and one or two other folks. And we did kind of the more detailed planning with all the agencies folks. So the agencies folks had all the intelligence. We were, one team, one fight, so to speak. We were there at Langley. We were sitting there reviewing the intelligence. And of course, what we wanted to know as operators, the agency was providing all that information. So what does the Pakistani integrated air defense looks like? If a helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter crosses the border here, when is the first chance we're going to get picked up? If we fly along this ridge line for 162 miles, and now the last 2 minutes, we're going to be vulnerable, what is the chance that the Pakistanis will hear us then? When we get on the ground, what's the compound look like? Is the compound loaded with explosives? How many men are at the compound? How many women and children are at the compound? All the sort of tactical details that we had to know for the operation, the agency was providing that for us in order to develop the plan. Having said that, we hadn't brought in the ground force, the SEALs, nor the helicopter pilots to rehearse the plan. So in that 3 weeks, when the president finally said, "Okay, you can bring the guys in," I called the SEAL commander of the SEAL team and I said, "Okay, I need these guys." There's been a lot of discussion about why did you pick the SEALs and not the Army guys? And I think folks thought that I picked the SEALs because I'm a SEAL. Let me tell you, the only thing I was interested in was being successful on this mission. But I had two commanders that I had, frankly, tremendous trust and confidence in. And interestingly enough, the Army guys, their squadron had literally just gone to Afghanistan and relieved the SEAL squadron that was there. And the SEALs had just flown back to the United States. So for my purpose, I had kind of cover for action. That SEAL squadron had returned and they were supposed to be on leave. So nobody really thought about, well, where are these guys? How come they're not showing up to the team? Because everybody just assumed they were with their girlfriends or their wives or they were off, someplace. So we took the opportunity of that 3 weeks really to have the guys come and do an exercise. Now, kind of one of the funny things about it was they were on leave and we recalled them. They thought we were recalling them for an exercise. And we do these kind of classified exercises every once in a while. And we have an undisclosed location on the East Coast where we do this. So we had them kind of congregate in Virginia. They flew down to this undisclosed location. They got into this classroom, and I can tell you, they were not happy campers. I had pulled them off of leave, again, with their girlfriends or out skiing in Tahoe, and they thought we'd pulled them off for an exercise. And the first thing that happened in the classroom was the CIA security guy got up and handed out non-disclosure statements. And then we had an agency officer get up and start to brief the intel. And I kind of was watching the body language, and all of a sudden they're looking around thinking, is this part of the exercise? Are we pretending to go get bin Laden? And then I think it dawned on them that this wasn't an exercise. And then I got up, had an opportunity to say a few words to tell them, hey boys, this is the real deal. And as soon as we get through here, grab your gear. The agency had done a magnificent job in those 3 weeks of building us a mock-up on this particular site. And so right after the briefing was over, the ground force commander got the guys together, collected them. We went to the rehearsal site, and then they began about 2 days of rehearsals on this mock-up that the CIA had built. That, and then kind of just to continue, after we did that, we went out to another location out on the West Coast. We ran a couple of full dress rehearsals, and then we brought some senior folks from the Pentagon and the intelligence community out and the White House. They got a chance to review our full dress rehearsal. And then after that, I was able to go back to the next meeting. And when the president said, you know, can you do this? I said, yes, sir, we can do this.
Did you have a personal assessment, Admiral, as to whether Osama bin Laden was there? Was it higher than Michael's 60% or Obama's 50%? Did you have just a personal guess?
You know, this is, I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but it really didn't matter to me from the tactical standpoint and the operational standpoint. If he was there, we were going to get him. If he wasn't, we were going to come home. The tactics of whether he was there or not really weren't going to fundamentally change. So, you know, when I looked at the intelligence, I actually was leaning more towards the high side, more towards Michael's, you know, 60%, maybe even a little higher, because, you know, some of the analysts there at the agency had such passion and they had been looking at this for so very long. And when you looked at all of the detail, which we did day in and day out, you really got a sense that, wow, this really could be him. The thing, of course, that was driving us a little crazy was we just couldn't get to certainty or near certainty that it was bin Laden, which goes to the boldness of the decision of the president, which we can talk about later. But again, I thought it was better than 50%, certainly at least 60%. But as an operational commander, that was really fairly immaterial. We were going to conduct the mission as though it were him, and we were going to do everything we needed to. If it turned out not to be him, we had a plan to address that.
Right. Michael, to the Admiral's point, what was the pressure like on the agency to come to a more definitive conclusion as to whether he was there? And how heavily did some of the agency's past experiences with Desert One, with Iraq WMD sort of weigh on that process?
So, you know, we took very seriously one of the things that analysts do regularly, which is not only have a judgment about something, you know, bin Laden is at this compound, but also have a confidence level with that judgment, low, medium, or high, right? And we take that very seriously. And that's a lesson from Iraq WMD, that we do that with almost every judgment, and in particular, every judgment that is important. And so the analysts who were working this actually did their own red team. They did their own, went through a process where they asked themselves, what are all the other possibilities that are consistent with the data here? You know, is this a drug dealer, right? And what would that look like? So they went through that process. And then the director of our counterterrorism center did his own little red team. He invited 4 analysts who weren't even part of CTC, but that he trusted and that he had great respect for, and he brought them in to look at all of the intelligence and ask them what they thought. And their response was, you know, we think he's there, but we're not as confident as the analysts who've been working this directly. So there were actually 2 red teams done by CIA. There wasn't a lot of pressure put on us by the president to, you know, nail down whether it was him or not, with that level of certainty that Bill talked about. But there was from Director Panetta. Director Panetta was putting intense pressure on the operational side of the agency to get to near certainty. And, you know, at the end of the day, we just couldn't. And, you know, we were very direct with the president about what we knew and what we didn't know. Very direct with the president that this was a circumstantial case, that we had no direct evidence that he was there. You know, we didn't have a source telling us that he was in there. So we were very clear about all of that. And I remember near the end, and Bill may remember this as well, as we were approaching the final days, I remember John Brennan in a deputies meeting saying that, you know, if he's not there, I want to make very clear to everybody that this is not an intelligence failure. And I think that was a remarkable thing for John to do at that moment in time.
Yeah. Admiral, so you referenced the courage that it took to make the decision. Let's fast forward to April 29th when the president greenlights the mission. You delay it 1 day because of bad weather. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you thought about talking to your men, you know, the evening before. It involves a basketball reference. What did you want to convey to them?
Yeah, so every time we have a large mission like this, a hostage rescue or a major operation, we do this kind of final and very large and very detailed brief. So in one of the hangars in our location there in Afghanistan, everybody that's involved, every helicopter pilot, every back-ender, every SEAL, every intelligence person, as I sit kind of on the front row, they come up and they brief me. Sir, I'm Chief Petty Officer Jones. My job tonight is to do this. Sir, I'm Lieutenant Smith. My job tonight is to do this. And they go through every aspect of the mission. And we were fortunate we had the mock-up in front of us, and everybody kind of tells their role. And then at the end of a kind of a briefing like that, the expectation is the commander gets up, gives some clarifying points, and frankly, you're a little bit like a coach with a team. I think you're expected to say something a little inspirational, and I hadn't really thought about it. And as the briefing is going on, finally, it's time for me to make a couple of clarifying points, which I did, things that I wanted to see the guys do. And then it kind of spontaneously occurred to me that, okay, I need to say something. And a lot of the guys there knew that I like to play basketball on Sundays in Afghanistan and Iraq. We'd go to the motor pool and play basketball. And so I said, look, I know a lot of you guys know I like to play basketball, and you kind of see a few of the heads nodding. And I said, look, I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Hoosiers. A few more heads are nodding. And I said, well, it's set in, I think I said like 1955, starring Gene Hackman as this coach of this small town basketball team, and the small town basketball team gets the chance to go to the state championship in Indianapolis, and they go from the small town in Indiana and they go up to the big city there in Indianapolis, and they get up into the stadium, and of course it's this huge stadium, and these kids have been playing on a very, very small court, and you can tell that they're nervous. They're about to play on the big court in front of this a large fan base. And Hackman says to one of his guys, he says, hey, walk off the length of the court. The guy walks off the length of the court. He says, how long? He says, Coach, it's 94 feet. He says, what's the height of the basket? The guy goes and measures it, says, Coach, it's 10 feet high. And the coach turns to the guys and he said, this is the exact same court that you've been playing on your whole life. Just play your game and we'll be fine. And so that was my message to the guys. All of these guys had spent a lot of time in combat. I mean, many of the helicopter pilots and all of the SEALs had been in this really since 9/11. So I knew they knew what to do. And so I said, just do it like you always do it, and we're going to be fine. And that was the message on Friday night. I will tell you, though, that the message on Sunday, when we finally were getting ready to do the raid, I left my little makeshift command center, and I went out to see the SEALs, and they were around kind of a fire pit. They had the game face on. They were getting all their ammunition, getting their gear ready to go. And once again, now, I'm sending them off. They're about to board the helicopter. And, they kind of turned to you as the coach for one final thing to say. And once again, I hadn't put a lot of thought into it until I arrived at the fire pit, but I knew exactly what needed to be said. And I turned to all of them and I said, look, since 9/11, all of you guys have dreamed about being the man that goes on the mission to get bin Laden. Well, this is the mission and you are the men. Let's go get bin Laden. And there wasn't a lot of hoopla. It was just, got it, and away they went. So those are the 2 points of interjection between me and the force.
As just a small public service announcement to the audience, we will go slightly longer, so don't worry, you will have time to have your questions answered. But just to make sure that we give this occasion its due, we're going to go a little bit longer till about 8:30. Michael, I'd like to get into the raid itself. You are watching from Washington and you see the Black Hawk helicopter go down. What goes through your mind? What do people in the room say?
So one of the things that the Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, repeatedly said in the meetings we had, both at the principals level and then with the president, was that something always goes wrong in a military operation. And that he remembered Desert One, right? The attempt to rescue the hostages in Tehran and what happened in the Iranian desert. And he reminded us that he was in that very room, in the Situation Room, dealing with that issue. So he had mentioned that a number of times. So when the helicopter went down, my first reaction, my first thought was for the safety of those forces on that helicopter. And my second reaction was, wow, Bob Gates was right. And I had a big lump in my throat because I didn't know what this meant. But one of the things that steeled me in that moment was how calm Bill McRaven was, and how he was absolutely ready for this and explained very quickly what the process was going to be going forward. I think he told us that everybody in helicopter was fine, and that the mission would go forward, and he would call for another helicopter to come in. And his calmness in that moment, helped me, and I know it helped Director Panetta and everybody else that was sitting in our operations center that day.
Yeah, Admiral, you said that you were already thinking of the next step when the helicopter went down. Was there ever a doubt in your mind that the mission would continue and be successful?
No, none whatsoever. Again, we had kind of gamed this out. As was mentioned earlier, when the helicopter came in, it was right at about the third deck, the third story of this building. And we had been concerned that when the helicopter came in order for the guys to fast rope down, to kind of rappel down from the helicopter, that somebody from inside the room could have fired an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, could have engaged the helicopter. We had door gunners. We were prepared for that. But I remember in talking to the helicopter pilot, he said, "Sir, unless I am dead at the controls, I will be able to get that helicopter into what we referred to as the animal pen, the other kind of portion of the compound." So as I saw the helicopter coming in, and I'm watching it on the screen, and it begins to waffle and lose control, and he began to spin. Of course, I have the advantage is I'm listening on the headset when the helicopter kind of hard lands in the animal pen. There's been, and I'm always a little embarrassed about the degree to which people think I was calm. Well, I was calm because I had the advantage of actually knowing what was going on at the time. The fact of the matter was I knew immediately that the guys were okay. We did have a backup plan. I had a helicopter waiting kind of around the corner because we had thought that we might lose a helicopter. And so you had to be prepared to deal with that. And as long as the guys were okay, I knew that we were going to be able to adjust. The ground force had rehearsed this multiple times. They had plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D.
And then after what probably seems like an eternity to everybody who's watching, you hear "Forgotten Country, Geronimo." And each of you thinks what? Michael, let's start with you.
So we knew that was the call sign for we got bin Laden. So that was an incredible moment. And it wasn't a locker room atmosphere, at CIA. It was somber, actually. We were certainly happy that we were right about the intelligence, and we were certainly happy that we took off the battlefield America's #1 enemy, and that we did it without losing a single man. But it wasn't a locker room atmosphere. It was a recognition that we killed a woman, we killed one of the wives accidentally, that we scared out of their wits a large number of children. And so, the whole picture was of great satisfaction, but, again, not a locker room kind of atmosphere at all.
Admiral, what did you think?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I was looking for the next mission execution checklist. So, when the ground force commander radioed in and said, "Forgotten Country, Geronimo, Geronimo, Geronimo," frankly, I don't think I gave it any thought other than, okay, what's the next line item on the execution checklist? What did occur to me, of course, was when he called in Geronimo and I reported to Director Panetta that we had Geronimo, then I hesitated for a second. I said, well, I don't know whether he's dead or whether we captured him. Contrary to popular belief, this was not a kill-only mission. We had talked a lot in the Situation Room about what happens if bin Laden, has his hands up and is clearly not a threat. And the answer was easy: we have to capture him. We have an obligation under the law of armed conflict to capture him. We were going to do that. We had a plan for doing that. But if he presented any threat at all, or if we could not ascertain in that split second that he was not a threat, then the guys had the right to take the shot. But what I didn't know after I made the comment was, ooh, is he alive or dead? So I called back to the ground force commander and I said, is it Geronimo EKIA, enemy killed in action? He reported that it was, and I immediately got back to Director Panetta to say Geronimo EKIA. And then, of course, I was looking on to the next line on the execution checklist to figure out what are we supposed to be doing next.
And one of those items, I assume, was actually trying to verify his identity, which posed a challenge in the immediate aftermath, right, Admiral? In particular, because maybe you lacked a tape measure.
Yeah. So well, on the target, all we could get back was from the force there. The intent, of course, was to take a picture and be able to relay that picture back. But candidly, everything was moving so fast that didn't end up becoming an option. They did take some pictures, obviously, on site, which we looked at as soon as they got back. But yeah, the other thing that happened on the compound, of course, was they found intelligence on the second floor. So the ground force commander, we had originally planned to only be on the ground for 30 minutes. And about, 20 minutes or 25 minutes into it, I get a call saying, hey, we found all this intelligence on the second floor. We'd like to scoop it up. Well, by this time, we're noticing that the Pakistanis are starting to react. They know something's going on, and I'm not sure exactly the sequencing, but now they were starting to alert people. And I was getting a little bit nervous that, hey, it was time to get out of there. But I didn't want to leave the intelligence because, we didn't know whether we would have access to this again. So I told him, okay, get everything you can. And frankly, I was calling back about every 5 minutes going, okay, how you doing? Sir, we're still picking up intel. And finally, about 45 minutes, so 15 minutes past my 30-minute timeline, I called down and I said, okay, you got to wrap it up. We got to get out of here. Took them about 3 minutes to kind of get out of, get all the women and children out of the way. We had already loaded the helicopter with demolition to blow it. Got the women and children out of the way, blew the helicopter. The backup helicopter came in. We'd already picked up, I think, bin Laden's remains by that time. Guys got out and we started heading back.
So just to wrap up the story of the raid itself before we move on to a couple of other topics, so much of its success has been attributed to the teamwork and the trust that was established and maintained between the intelligence officers and your team, Admiral. Was that unique to this operation? Was it unprecedented? Characterize a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't unprecedented. I mean, we had been working with the agency, well, frankly, my whole career, I have been working with it, 37 years. I met my first agency officer when I was deployed to the Philippines, and they were, an old Vietnam veteran. So I'd spent my whole career on and off working with the agency. But 9/11 really accelerated that. We had agency bases were co-located with my force. So it was just this, always kind of this team that worked together on all the important targets. I think what made this even a better level of collaboration was really, Leon Panetta, Michael Morell, the senior leadership of the agency reached out, embraced us in a way that I do think was unprecedented. We were in fact one team because we knew that this mission was too important to be anything but one team. And again, I give just tremendous credit to Leon and Michael because they set the tone early on. They built the culture of the team. They gave us access to everything. There wasn't anything that we needed that the agency didn't provide.
Michael, anything to add there?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. So this level of trust was as Bill described. And one moment where it was driven home for me was Bill asked us, and he mentioned this earlier, Bill asked us, do your analysts think that the compound or the house is wired for explosives? So the analysts went back and they thought it through and they worked it through and they come back and they say no. And Bill says, okay. And that Bill just saying, okay, thank you very much, and going on was an amazing moment in him trusting the CIA.
Let's talk a little bit about Al-Qaeda today. So obviously, bin Laden's successor, Ayman al-Zawahiri, takes over within a matter of weeks. The NCTC director, Chris Miller, recently confirmed, has an op-ed out today saying his assessment is Al-Qaeda is in crisis and that Zawahiri will die of natural causes if he's lucky. And if not, the long arm of the United States will inevitably find him and bring him to justice in one form or another. It elicits a question of why Zawahiri is still at large. And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, maybe I'll take that. So before we found bin Laden, I can't tell you how many people would ask us, why haven't you found bin Laden yet? And the director of our counterterrorism center, would answer with a quip. He would say, because he is hiding. I would answer it with a little bit more analytic bent to it. I would say, it took the FBI 17 years to find the Unabomber. It took the FBI 7 years to find the bomber of the Atlanta Olympics. And those two people were hiding on the FBI's own soil, the FBI's own turf. And here we were looking for a guy who was, on somebody else's turf. And that gives that person a huge advantage. And if you take extraordinary security practices, bin Laden never used a phone after Tora Bora. The two brothers who were at the compound, Abu Ahmed and Abrar, never turned their phones on until they were 30 kilometers away from the compound. So extraordinary operational security. So if you're going to go to that length and you are in another country, it is not easy for the United States of America to find you. So I'm sure they're still looking for Zawahiri, but we haven't found him yet, but we will.
Do you think if Osama bin Laden were alive today, he would agree with this assessment that Al-Qaeda is in crisis, or would he view its potency and its resiliency a different way?
Yeah, I read the piece today, and Olivia, my reaction to it was, it's true of the core Al-Qaeda organization in the AfPak area, but the jihadist extremist movement is now much bigger than Al-Qaeda core and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Right? It now stretches from West Africa all the way to Southeast Asia. And it includes Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda affiliates in Africa and in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia, and it includes ISIS. It includes ISIS in Afghanistan, ISIS in Africa. It is huge, right? So the number of jihadist extremists who are willing to use violence is magnitudes greater today than it was on September 10th, 2001. It's down a bit from where it was in 2017, but it is still very large. So this threat, remains significant. We have other threats in the world that we need to focus on, absolutely, but this threat remains significant.
So let me ask you a little bit about decapitations, generally speaking, because the Trump administration has carried out a number of them, taking out high-profile leadership, including Qasem Soleimani, head of IRGC, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of ISIS, Hamza bin Laden's son, AQAP's Qasim al-Rimi. What effect have those decapitations had? I'll leave it to both of you to comment.
So maybe I'll go first here. So let's take Qasem Soleimani and set him aside because he was a senior official in a nation state as opposed to a non-state actor. But the evidence is absolutely clear. The analysis of the evidence, both inside government and outside government, it is absolutely clear that the decapitation strategy degrades a terrorist organization and degrades their capability to attack you. And that happens for two reasons. One is when you remove a senior leader, that person gets replaced by somebody. And yes, absolutely, that replacement may end up being more effective, but it takes some time for that person to learn his job. And so there is a period of time in which he weakened the group. More importantly, the decapitation strategy forces a terrorist group to take extraordinary measures to protect themselves. And it forces them to put security at the front of their mind. So, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we now know this, right, directly from the intelligence that Bill's guys collected at Abbottabad, that our decapitation strategy was an obsession of bin Laden. He was trying to figure out, how did we do this? What mistakes were they making? How could they protect themselves? And so when you force them to think about their own security, you don't give them the opportunity to think about attacking you.
Yeah,
Admiral, did you want to add?
Yeah, there's nothing I can add to Michael's assessment. He is spot on.
All right, Admiral, then I will ask you this question, which is about the story that has roiled the news cycle and much of the country for the past week. Multiple news outlets via multiple sources have reported on the president making disparaging comments about members of the military and prisoners of war. The president and his administration have of course, vociferously denied this. We don't expect you to be in a position to know as to where the truth lies, but I would like to get your response to those alleged comments.
Well, and to your point, Olivia, you know, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of the discussion about, you know, losers and suckers. So I'd been asked earlier to comment on that, and I said, look, you know, I'll leave that to the pundits to discuss the nature of that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, we have an obligation. We in the military have an obligation to be apolitical. We have a responsibility to follow the commander-in-chief. And no matter, you know, how egregious the commander-in-chief may be, no matter how tense the relationships might be between the military and the commander-in-chief, we have an obligation. We swore an oath that we would follow the Constitution, and the president is the duly elected representative of the people of this country, and therefore we are going to follow the president of the United States. And presidents have always had kind of contentious relationships with the military, varying degrees. Now, I would offer this president seems to be taking it a little further. If you, you know, you don't have to even believe the part about losers and suckers. Clearly, the comment the other day that was frankly very concerning to me was when he felt that that the top people in the Pentagon were continuing wars so that you know, the military contractors could benefit from it. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. 37 years, I never saw a single decision made by any of the military leadership that was about benefiting you know, the military-industrial complex. So anybody that thinks generals and admirals and senior leaders in the Pentagon are looking at putting men and women in harm's way to benefit some big-time contractor, they don't have an appreciation for the nature of the men and women that sign up to be in the military. So that part was frankly, you know, incredibly offensive to me that the president would make those comments. I will tell you that I appreciated the Chief of Staff of the Army, Jim McConville, coming out and making it very clear that those leaders in the military, we don't make decisions on that. War truly is the measure of last resort when it comes to resolving a conflict. And the last thing military leaders want is to send men and women that they are responsible for into a combat zone. And they would never, ever do it to benefit somebody's pocketbook.
Thank you, Admiral. Michael, anything to add? Or
Yeah, I would just add one thing. You know, we lose people at CIA. We don't lose as many as the United States military does, but we lose people. And one of the hardest things that I had to do as deputy director and acting director was meet with the families of our officers who died in the line of duty. Spouses and kids and parents and brothers and sisters. And I will tell you, every single one of the individuals we lost, who I knew, were the best and the brightest that America has to offer.
Related somewhat to that point, the president made some news today indicating that troop levels in Afghanistan would be coming down to about 4,000. This is coming as talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government are set to begin this weekend after the release of some high-value prisoners from custody. Admiral, you said last year that we should expect to be in Afghanistan for a very long time. Do you think this trajectory is not the right one to take?
Well, and certainly, you know, you can't lay this at the feet of the Trump administration. I think Trump administration is trying to figure out, you know, what is a graceful exit strategy in Afghanistan. I don't know that there is a graceful exit strategy. You know, I'm not personally convinced that any deal with the Taliban will be, you know, worth the paper that it's written on. I think if we were to pull out U.S. troops completely from Afghanistan, It would not take the Taliban more than 6 months to a year to come back to where they were kind of pre-9/11. So I don't have a lot of confidence in the integrity of the Taliban. Having said that, I think if we can leave a force in there that is always in a position to be able to help the Afghan National Security Forces, to be able to keep the kind of Taliban at bay, then I think we're going to have to accept that is the price of making sure that Afghanistan can, to some degree, remain stable over time. It is unfortunately a high price to pay, but what we have learned in the military is how to do this in a way that hopefully will not lose a lot of great soldiers. But yeah, I do think we probably need to be in Afghanistan for a very long time. As far as the troop numbers go, I haven't studied it in a while. 4,000 may be enough to maintain, a presence, a counterterrorism presence, a presence to be able to provide strike capability to the Afghans if they need it. So that may, in fact, be the right number. But again, I would be concerned about brokering a deal with the Taliban. Although, again, I understand why the administration is trying to do it. I'm just unfortunately not hopeful that it will bear any real fruit.
Michael?
My assessment is that if we were to leave, if we were to remove U.S. military forces and the coalition followed, we're obviously not the only country there, and the coalition followed, and we removed the about $4 billion a year in financial assistance that we give to the Afghan government, my assessment is that the Taliban would take over the country again in a matter of months. And my assessment is contrary to what the Taliban says. My assessment is that they would provide safe haven to Al-Qaeda. So I agree 100% with Bill that the best option is to maintain a troop presence in Afghanistan that provides stability for the Afghan government and gives us the opportunity to keep the Taliban from taking over the country and to degrade terrorist groups that might pop up there. I do understand the politics of it, and I do understand that at the end of the day, if we're going to put the lives of American servicemen and women in harm's way, there has to be public support for that. And if there's not public support for it and we have to leave, then we're going to have to find a way to do two things. We're going to have to find a way to collect intelligence on what's going on inside Afghanistan and whether Al-Qaeda is indeed given safe haven and whether they're rebuilding and whether they're planning to attack us. And if they are, we have to find a way to militarily to reach in there and deal with that problem and degrade them. So the best course of action is to stay with a small number of troops. If we can't do that, then we got to figure out another way to collect intelligence and conduct military action. CT.
Well, I have more than abused my time with the two of you, and I'm going to turn to some audience questions because they have been very patient. I'm going to start with one from Leslie Ireland, who was a recent panelist here. She says, kudos to the women and men of the IC for their persistent pursuit of Osama bin Laden. It would be nice to hear about the role other agencies in the IC played in this historical event. So Michael, I think that one is best answered by you.
Sure, this was a team. Just like this was a team between JSOC and CIA, this was a team effort inside the IC. And the team inside the IC was really CIA, the National Security Agency, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It was those three agencies that really came together. And in some cases, the folks from NSA and NGA were working this without their superiors knowing it. So that's how tightly it was held, but we could not have done this without the men and women of NSA and NGA.
Here's one from Vice Admiral Bruce Lindsay. Was burying Osama bin Laden at sea part of the original plan, or was it an after the event decision?
Oh no, it was absolutely part of the plan. When we were discussing it in the Situation Room, the president asked me, if we get bin Laden, what's the plan with his body? And I went back to a previous mission we had done against a terrorist named Salih Nabhan. We had gotten Salih Nabhan in Somalia, and we anticipated this might be a problem, that if we killed Salih Nabhan, we were going to bring him back, put him on a U.S. ship, and then, what would we do with his body? So we went to great lengths early on the Salih Nabhan case to take a look at what are our options. Well, we followed Islamic kind of traditions. You clean the body, you wrap them in white linen, you have to bury them within a certain amount of time. There's a certain prayer that has to be said. So in the planning for bin Laden, when the president asked the question, I said, you know, we'll bury him at sea. And then I went through the backstory of how we had looked at this before.
The Vice Admiral also asks, what do you think was the secret to success in maintaining the secrecy of this operation? I think you've both pointed out that very senior officials in the administration were not briefed until a day or two before the operation. So how was that secrecy maintained, and how much did it matter for this mission?
So I think the key was the president's demand for secrecy, and the president himself playing a role in deciding who was briefed in when. You know, we could not tell the Secretary of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs until the president gave the okay. So, you know, he set the tone. And then inside CIA, Leon asked me, the director asked me to play that role. And I actually delegated that responsibility of reading people in to the head of our counterterrorism center, because I knew that he would actually be tougher than I would be in making those decisions. So there was a tone set at the top. It was an understanding of how important it was to keep this secret, because if it leaked, he'd be gone and we'd have to start all over again. So I think at the end of the day, it was pretty easy to do. I have to tell you, I had some tough conversations in the aftermath with senior CIA officers who were not aware what was going on. Very senior CIA officers who were not briefed in. And, you know, we had a conversation and they understood at the end of the day why, and we're okay with it. But it was very tightly held.
Right. And Admiral, you even have a story about running into a reporter outside of the White House on one of your trips in.
I did. I was heading into the White House, and one of my very old and dear friends, Karen Tumblety, was also a reporter for the Washington Post. She happened to be at the security gate just as I was checking in. I had not seen her in a very long time. And so, you know, she starts, we started with some pleasantries, and then of course she wants to know, well, why are you coming to the White House? And fortunately, a little bit of cover for action. The whole issue in Libya was unfolding at the time. We were kind of, there was a lot of debate about what was going to happen with Gaddafi. So she kind of posed a question. She said, so does this have anything to do with Libya? And of course, I was a little bit coy and said, well, you know, I can't really. Okay. So we left it at that. But Karen has remained a great friend in spite of the fact that I didn't exactly tell her the truth at that point in time. And she understood why.
Michael, you also have a story that involves your wife and hockey tickets in this realm of secrecy.
Yeah, when Bill canceled the raid on Saturday, I figured there might be a chance that the bad weather would remain and it would get canceled for Sunday. So a friend offered me tickets to Game 5 of the Washington Capitals playoff series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so I took the tickets and I took them to work with me on Sunday morning. And when I realized that the raid was going forward, I called my wife and asked her to come to the agency and pick the tickets up and, make sure somebody got to use them. And we had turned the director's conference room into an operations center. So there was a beehive of activity around my office because my office was right across an inner corridor from the conference room. And my wife had a pass that got her onto the CIA compound and got her into the building. So I gave the tickets to my security detail and I said to them, meet her downstairs. Do not let her come up here because she will see this beehive of activity, right? And start asking questions. Well, they did one better. They met her out at the front gate of CIA. And the way she puts it, the tone of their voice was when they handed her the tickets, they said, here are the tickets, ma'am. And the tone of their voice was, you don't go any further than the front gate. So, yeah.
I'm sure it was fine to come home too. Here's a question from Mark Lowenthal. Did the president sign a finding, and was anyone on the Hill informed? This is actually an interesting question.
So this fell under an existing finding. So there was no need for a new memorandum of notification, number one. Number two, Director Panetta felt it important that we keep the congressional committees briefed on what we were doing. And so without the knowledge of the White House, Director Panetta had kept the chairman and ranking members of both the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee informed as we went through this process. So this was, they were read into this over a period of months. And, it was just the chairman and ranking, nobody else. Sometimes the director briefed them, sometimes I briefed them. There was obviously no leaks. I do remember a few days before the raid, Tom Donilon, who was then National Security Advisor, saying to Director Panetta, it's probably time to bring the congressional committees into this. And Director Panetta said, well, I've actually been briefing them all along. And, that was an interesting moment. I don't know further about the conversation that happened.
Yeah. Here's a question from a former counterterrorism case officer. How do you feel about former operators and intelligence officers writing books about their activities in war zones to include this operation?
Maybe I'll let Bill go first because.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This came up quite a bit when I went from being the commander of JSOC to the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. And invariably, of course, it was kind of posed as an indictment of the SEALs that were out there writing books. So at one point in time, I went down to the library that we had at U.S. Special Operations Command and pulled out books that were written, by all service members about their exploits in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what I told folks, I said, look, I have no problem with people writing books or doing movies, as long as you go through the process. There is a DOD, there's a CIA review process. You have to go through that process. And if you do that, I'm fine. Now, what I would offer is, if you're going to do that, make it about, the sacrifice of the families and the heroism of the guys. Don't get off on, kind of political tangents. Again, not my place to make that, but I said, just as a recommendation, I said, because the fact of the matter is, all of us kind of growing up as young men and women will read the books of, again, the great heroic acts, the bravery of the intelligence community, the bravery of the men and women in uniform. Those are important stories to be told. So I'm all right with people writing books, as long as, again, you go through the process of ensuring that that you're not compromising any sources and methods or important American secrets.
So Olivia, I agree 100% with what Bill said. The only thing I would add is that America is really the only country in the world where former senior officials and former working level officials write books. And I think it is an important way to capture kind of a first draft of history. And we are the only country in the world where that really happens. And I think that is an important part of our democracy and an important part of the building of the history of what happened here.
There's a related question here from Public Interest Declassification Board. While this is an incredible oral history, what about the records documenting this history? When will these be declassified?
So I have no idea. There are rules regarding declassification, a certain number of years for certain types of information, when information has to be looked at for declassification. The truth is that much of this has been declassified, and much of it was declassified on the first night. I don't know if Bill knows this, but when we were done at the White House with the president's speech that night, we did a press backgrounder. So Director Panetta kind of kicked it off. I was asked to brief all of the intelligence story. So what did we know? All of the stuff we knew, just not how did we know it, right? What were the methods that we used to find it out? We weren't allowed to brief that, but we were allowed to brief all the intelligence. And then Mike Vickers, who was then Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, actually briefed the raid itself, kind of the military story. So that first night, the vast majority of the information was out there. The only thing that's still not out there is the sources and methods used to collect the intelligence.
I'm just updating technical. My AirPods have gone out of battery, so I am just updating them. Here's another question. Did Pakistan turn over any further intelligence from the compound after the mission?
So I don't believe they did. So we did not get all of it. We did not get all of it. They got some of it. I don't believe they did. And they would not give us access to the family to debrief them. So they were not particularly cooperative in the aftermath. I would say that they were not happy with what we did. You know, I went to Pakistan 3 weeks after to try to repair the intelligence relationship. And I was told by my counterpart that they were deeply embarrassed. And they were deeply embarrassed by two things. They were deeply embarrassed by the fact that we found bin Laden on Pakistani territory and they did not. And they were deeply embarrassed that the United States military could get so far inside of Pakistan without the Pakistani military knowing. And he said, I can't overstate how embarrassed we are, you know, within our government and with our public in what you did here. So it took a while to get the relationship back to where it needed to be, but I think given that environment, they were not in the mood of sharing anything with us.
Here's a question, I think, for the Admiral. What are the top 3 things that you would advise a team that was planning a similar mission?
Yeah, you know, when you have a complex mission, the hardest part is to simplify it as much as you can. I mean, you really want to take a look at how do you make it as simple as possible. So in this case, for example, we looked at a number of options. You know, could we parachute to an offset location? Could we drive a vehicle up to the compound? So there were a number of different options for getting to the target. But in reality, in my mind at least, the easiest one was just going to be to do what we did every single night, which was to get on helicopters and fly to the target. So simplifying a mission, taking as much of the risk out of it as possible. You know, people always think about special operations, and I think sometimes folks think we're a little cavalier about it. You know, we're good at what we do. We just kind of grab our guns and go, and nothing could be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is we do detailed planning. We do detailed rehearsals. We get as much of the intelligence as we can because that's the only way to figure out how you're going to reduce the risk to make it manageable in a mission like this.
There's a tongue-in-cheek question for you also, Admiral, which is, did you make your bed today?
Every morning, every morning.
All right, with the minutes that are remaining, I'm going to turn it over back to Larry, who I'm sure will want to wrap things up, and Dean Roselle. So Larry, take it away.
Well, my gosh, what a 90 minutes we just had here. This inside look at this operation, the detailed look at this operation was really inspiring, and I lived through it, and I'm inspired all over again. I can only imagine some of the young students, the young professionals that are watching today will watch this and put aside some of the shenanigans we've been hearing about in the news recently and actually be inspired to come and serve the country as you two gentlemen have done. We do have some more Hayden Center events coming up in the not too distant future. There, I put my light on. I apologize. I was in the dark. We will be participating in an event next month with the Schar School Center for Security Policy Studies, where Michael will join in with Ellen Leipson in having a conversation with Andrew McCabe, former Deputy Director, Acting Director of the FBI, who's recently joined the Schar School as a distinguished visiting professor. So that will be on Wednesday, October 7th at noon. You'll see details about that coming out shortly. And then sometime in October, we don't have the date set yet, we'll be doing a full Hayden Center event looking at election security as we head towards our November presidential election. With that, I would like to thank again Olivia for doing this wonderful moderating job. I'd like to thank our audience for your great participation. We clearly had way too many questions to get to, so I apologize if you asked a question that we did not get to. But I hope we covered most of the subjects that you all were interested in hearing about. And lastly, I'd like to thank Michael Morell once again for his great participation with the Hayden Center, and Admiral McRaven for participating tonight and for everything you've done for the country in your full career. So with that, I will close the event and say thank you. Good night. You might have time to, I think we may have missed the opening kickoff of the football game if that's your druthers. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Olivia. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you all.